This is the Darcy Giroux Podcast, episode 47. Today, my guest is Dave Williams. He's a Conservative MLA for the Shuswap riding in British Columbia, and today we're going to be talking about the BC Conservative Party. Dave Williams, welcome to the Darcy Giroux Podcast. How are things?
Things are great. And how are things with you?
Yeah, things are good. Things are good. It has been, it's been a long time. I don't know. The last time I saw you, I think it was probably
a lot younger.
we were a lot younger. Exactly. Yeah. But I think we went, you met me in Salmon Arm one time when I was still living there, and we went golfing.
Yep.
And that was about, I want to say might have been 15 years ago even. I don't know.
Probably, and your son beat us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so first of all, so you were part of this kind of I don't know if you want to say if it's right to call it kind of a populist conservative thing that happened in this last BC election. I mean, there was a lot of, disillusionment with the current administration and also with the current opposition. And you were elected to the riding. What's it called? Is it the Columbia Shuswap? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, they renamed it. It's now Salmon Arm-Shuswap. It previously was Shuswap.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So
right on. So yeah, first of all, I mean, I guess that is a good question. Is it accurate to call it kind of a populist conservative thing that's happened there, a transformation of sorts?
No, I wouldn't say populist.
No, okay.
Populist parties are generally parties that follow popular rules. So if all of a sudden something is in favor, they go for it. I think that's what got us in trouble in the first place, right? No, actually, I would call us we're a grassroots movement. A lot of people that were disillusioned with, the former Liberal Party turned United Party, which they weren't a very effective opposition. And then, of course, you got the NDP, which kept radically moving further and further left. And so, they're a real socialist party. And so big government, big taxes, right? So, and people they felt that governments weren't really responding to their needs and what they weren't listening. So,
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've known you almost my whole life, but how, I was a bit surprised to see you get into politics, to be honest. And so what was that something you always wanted to do, or what happened there?
No, I usually fall into things, but out here, because of living out here for so long, knowing the area so well, I actually really care about where I live. I was always involved, as coaching sports.
Yep.
And doing things like that. And then in my later years, I was working for BC Assessment, doing taxes, right? Tax assessment. And so I'd be all through the area. So I'd see a lot of people all the time. And so I hear, from people all the time. And when I left them, I actually got an appointment on the appeal panel in here. So I worked there for a bit, doing that on the appeal panel for people's taxes, right? And that was a Liberal appointment, actually. Way back when, probably 2012. And then on top of that, I got involved with the CSRD a little bit. I was on a couple of boards there too, like the Board of Variance and stuff, because I usually get involved in things if there's a need or I think that something's wrong. In the case with BC Assessment, I work for BC Assessment. I go what? I know all the people that own little stores out here, right? And they were getting nailed with the same cap rate that was developed for the whole Okanagan. And as you know, people out here with the small stores were only making money primarily in the summertime. And so that seemed kind of like unfair taxation, right? And so I figured, what? Opportunity, arise where I could be on the appeal panel, right? And so then I could actually make changes, right? You can't override your bosses when you work there. Then on the flip side, the CSRD they needed somebody with the background that I had, and the board of variance was the same thing where they would give variances, and there was one road here where they put a condo development in where they didn't move the road, and other places where they made them build a highway almost right for
Hmm.
other people. What I've been down terrible, terrible roads where it hasn't been improved. And I go like, how does this happen, right? And the thing is, so you want things to be fair, and you want to live in a place where things are working for the people. They're looking out for the people. So the thing is, so in that case, I would get involved in the odd thing, right? And then one thing led to another. Then when the opportunity came around for the Conservatives, John had got kicked out of the Liberals, right? The leader of the Conservative Party, he got kicked out of the Liberal Party, and he sat as an independent. And when that happened, I'm sitting here, same as everybody else, watching TV, and I'm going like, you know what? I like that guy
Hmm.
because he's probably not going to get elected, right? So he stood up for his values, and I go like, I would do that, right? I go like, I like, like obviously that's somebody who stands for values over being popular,
Yeah.
right? And then one thing led to another. He became the leader of the Conservative Party. Right at that point, then I got involved with the Conservative Party.
Right. Yeah. So now, has this particular Conservative Party ever had um, members sitting in the legislature?
Actually, the Conservative Party of British Columbia were the very first elected party when the province became a province,
Hmm.
and they were in power up until about the early 1930s, and then they kind of got decimated. And the last time they ever elected anybody was in the 1970s.
Right.
So, as most people listening to your show would realize, British Columbia is pretty much a left wing province,
Well,
right?
yeah.
right?
Well,
They're,
hopefully
they're,
not
they're
for long.
right. So the thing is, so no, so they kind of disappeared for many, many years.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll share with you. I mean, I have some friends that were in the Libertarian Party of BC, and also in the Conservative Party of BC at the time, and so say we're going back, I don't know, again, call it 10, 15 years. Um, I mean, the Conservative Party was only getting as much traction as the Libertarians, who are, don't get me wrong, they're friends of mine, but I mean, they're known for being on the fringes of politics, right? Um, so I don't. So it seems to me like the party is, what you guys have done there is impressive in that amount of time to to turn this into. I mean, in a way, it looked to me like a. I know you guys still didn't form government, but it's like a landslide as far as getting some people with from the Conservative Party in there.
Massive change.
Yeah.
Yes. The thing is, yeah, massive shift in the province. And then everybody turns around and says, well, the Conservative Party is a very ultra right wing party, which is not true. They've moved the bar,
Hmm.
right? Our policies when it comes to a lot of things would actually be pretty centrist like 20, 30 years ago, right? So, it's not the fact, it's the fact that the province and the country has shifted to the left a lot, right? On top of that, we've been overtaxed, and basically your rights have been taken away. And so, I think that people have had enough. And the thing is, and it's a generational move where politics is starting to move the other direction now, right? And so they're saying enough's enough. Let's turn it around a little bit, right? You know, Libertarians, I wouldn't really call them on the fringe. They may have some fringe policies, right? But the fact is, I have friends that are libertarians, and the thing is, the biggest thing for libertarians, they want less government, they want freedom, right?
Yeah.
Less government's better, right? So we're not that far off. We believe that less government's better as well, too. The thing is, so democracy works better when it's free enterprise.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, without a doubt. Um, so, in your thoughts, what you know, so two things, I guess. First of all, what was the driving force, that pushed British Columbia so far to the left? And then, secondly, what is your guys' success a reaction to that, or is there something that is bigger happening that's pushing, like you say, moving the bar um, further towards like you know common sense, normal type of stuff, right?
Well, I think the moving to the left has been going on for over time. It's like when people talk about their rights being eroded, there's a lot of people that support us that came from communist countries, and had lots of meet and greets, and I actually meet people that came from, Russia and some former communist countries, and they were saying, you know what, Canada's kind of moving in that same direction. They started taking away a little, one right at a time, right? And then you don't really notice it, but pretty soon your life is being controlled. And so I think it comes down to a reality where people are actually starting saying, you know what, enough's enough. And so I think the moving to the left has been happening over a generation, right? As for moving the bar to the right, I think that's a reaction of the fact that people want to change, right? They're saying, you know what, politicians don't listen to us, and this is what we want, and no matter what we say we want, it doesn't happen. And basically, they're not going by the will of the people who vote them in. They're going by, like a global politics or whatever, right? That are pushing agendas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, let's look at some of the Conservative Party platform policies. There is the theme, like a general conservative type theme, and um, reducing regulations and and government interference and stuff. Can you tell us a bit about that and how and maybe a few of the policies that you're keen on, where where that conservative theme is really prominent.
Well, the biggest thing I hear about all the time from people is that they complain about soji. They think that parents' rights have been eroded, and I get many people actually calling and saying, I hope you guys get elected because I want to send my kids back to school because they're homeschooling them.
Yeah.
You hear from school trustees or the NDP government, they'll turn around and say, well, soji's not curriculum; it's only a program. It's only learning materials. But you also hear differently from parents saying that no, they're pushing agenda. So whether it's curriculum or not, what there has to be better oversight. Nothing's there's nobody's saying everybody should be treated well when they go to school, and they should be not bullied, and there should be no there should be diversity, no problem there. But on the same token, parents should have the control to have a say in their child's upbringing and what they're learning in school. And so that's one of the really big ones. Then, of course, affordability comes into play, right? And whether it be, the average taxpayer who's going out there and going to work, or a business owner, and what they're saying is that we're being taxed to death, right? So, you're paying a tax on top of a tax for a lot of things. And so what they're saying is that, rather than big government spending and giving out all these grants and programs and everything else, it's about time you just kind of rolled it back a bit, right? And put a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more in your pocket. The fact is, if you go back 20 or 30 years ago, you go to a restaurant, you go to a pub, you could go anywhere, movie theaters, and there'd be a lot more people there than there is now. Why? They had disposable income. If you give people income, I don't know, I'd be a millionaire today. I tell you what, most people don't save it, they spend it, right? So the thing is, so I think that's good for the economy.
Yeah.
So, so that's another one. And then, of course, healthcare is always a big one as well, right? So, in the case of healthcare, the fact is it's an efficient system, right? So, even though we have a public healthcare system, you really don't have any healthcare when the emergency rooms are closed, right? And here you are in a small town, and you go have an emergency and you end up having to drive to the major cities like Kelowna or Kamloops. Luckily for us in Salmon Arm here, we haven't had that problem because a lot of doctors want to live here. But if you're living in Lillooet or Ashcroft or any of those places, they constant having shortage of staff, and they're not open. And and so and then on top of that, you got people who are waiting for surgeries, and we're talking minor surgeries like knee surgery or more along the minor surgeries, and they can't get in. So from our standpoint, if you have an inefficient system, how long, at some point you got to say, okay, we got to make some major changes here, right? And so with our platform was the fact that the change would be is that we would allow some public private. So for instance, if you had to get a knee surgery, you could actually go to a private clinic. The money would follow the patient. And so you wouldn't be paying, you're not paying over and above what you pay for medical services. It's being paid by the medical services plan, but you would have the ability to, if you couldn't get into a regular hospital, you could actually go to a private clinic and get it done, which they do now. So if you're a hockey player or you have a WCB claim, they do that now. So what it would be doing is allowing the general public to have the same opportunity. So then we'll go to a third one. The third one's critical illness, right? And so, as you know, my spouse passed away in 2016. Okay, so in our case, we actually went to the hospital because she had a stomach ache. They caught a little spot on her lung, and it turned out they said that the day we were there, she said, we really can't say anything, but it's cancer, right? But they won't diagnose it until you actually go see an oncologist and they stage it. And so from the time we were in the hospital in October, my spouse didn't get in to go see a oncologist in Kelowna until probably, I think it was the second week of December. By that time, it had grown, and so inoperable. And so there's many people that have critical illnesses because of long delays. It's costing, and in some cases, it costs a life. So you should be doing everything you possibly can to fix the healthcare system.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I yeah, and again, um, so sorry, Dave, about that. And I guess, yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to talk to you about it, so it's hitting me a little bit right now. Um, so is but if we were to look at healthcare and kind of back to the what are there like regulations, or are there things in the way that are prohibiting these type of private um, healthcare providers to exist? Like I'm always under the impression that it's not that easy for a surgeon or a doctor to start that type of privatized clinic, and the incentives really lean the other way towards just kneeling to the public system.
Yeah, what's in the way is the NDP government. Right now, there are private clinics. People go for private MRIs or CAT scans,
Yeah.
and there's private clinics that actually provide that service. And like I was saying previous, is that hockey players, Vancouver Canucks and hockey professional athletes, they get in to get their surgeries done right away and through a private system within this province, right? WCB claims they want people back to work immediately, right? And so they have no problem sending them to a private clinic. What they have a problem with is the general public allowing them, because somehow they think that's going to erode the public system, which it wouldn't. So we're looking at the fact that it would actually only enhance the public system. Not only that, it would force hospitals and would force the current system to actually improve their efficiencies, right? So if they can't, if they're not doing, if a private clinic can do 10 surgeries in a day and our hospital can only do 6, well, you know what? They should get them up to speed to get 10. You know what? Because their funding depends on it. Because the fact is the funding follows the person. So Yeah, and so yeah, so like you're saying, so what's in the way? No. So the thing is just blowback because they're saying, oh well, you're eroding the public system that we have in Canada. That's not true. As long as it's coming out of it's taxpayer funded, it doesn't matter who's getting paid, whether it be the general hospital or a private clinic, right? It's still taxpayer paid. You're still not paying over and above what you'd be paying for medical services or the medical services plan.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, is there like again, we've I've had a few healthcare workers and stuff on the program. I sometimes joke that I will um change the format of the podcast to promote to exclusively promote the privatization of Canadian healthcare. But are there other things in the platform that are allowing for further uh, decentralization or even privatization of healthcare stuff?
Uh, no, and I wouldn't say it's real privatization. It's basically having a complementary system that would only enhance the current system. And so no, no. But do we encourage competition? Absolutely. Whether it come to ICBC, like in this province, we have government car insurance, and so if you allowed in that case privatization, um, wouldn't be a bad thing. In my own personal opinion, is that there should never be one of anything, right? You should always have some competition because that just keeps prices in check, right? So that, that it really doesn't matter what it is, right? You know,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I
that's
think
right. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly. That is the thing. That type of competition that you're talking about, those free market principles, it drives prices down and it drives quality up. It happens in, the like Rothbard's example was always talking about shoes, right? If the government was in charge of wearing shoes and they somebody asked to or somebody said, "Oh, we're going to privatize shoemaking," everybody would lose their minds because the government's always done this. But in the case of ICBC, without a doubt, there's too many examples to list where the benefits to the average person introducing that type of competition are plain as day, right?
yeah, yeah, and then other policies that we have that we actually promote would be actually stimulating the economy through resource development. There's an awful lot of mine projects there in this province that are sitting with environmental go ahead, three environmental assessments, and yet they still haven't got the go ahead to go, right? Um, you know, the thing is, you have to have environmental laws. And everybody says, oh, we're anti climate and we're anti this. No, we're not anti anything, right? The thing is, so if you build a pipeline and you run natural gas, liquid natural gas out to China, right, and ship it over to China, and they take off a coal-fired plant, I think you're going to be doing more for the environment globally than turning around and taxing, carbon for gasoline in this province, and whether this province or this country, for that matter,
Hmm.
because we have such a small population and it's such a niche thing that it's not really making a difference on a global scale. It's such a small. So basically, you're actually hurting our economy for an ideology,
Oh yeah.
right?
Oh, for sure.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you really want to make a difference globally, actually, you could be doing it. It seems counterproductive, but it's actually very productive by turning around and getting rid of the worst pollution, right? And so on a global, we all breathe the air, and I don't think they have borders,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah, absolutely. So, can you expand on that a little bit? Like some of the again, sounds to me like you're talking about reducing some of these regulations or some of these NDP policies. Can you expand on specifically what they are?
yeah, well, right off the get go, the carbon tax gone, right?
Nice.
And then we were going to look at a lot of the smaller little taxes that are on for the climate action plan as well, because a lot of those things inhibit growth, and they really don't do a whole lot. Um, the the other thing is that, on the same token, you should have programs or encourage innovation and technology, and so you should be looking at other forms of energy as well. Like John, our leader, actually even mentioned during the campaign that, nuclear, right? Look at nuclear, look at wind, look at geothermal. Like, you should be looking at everything. You shouldn't be narrow-minded, and that's not to say that it's efficient. That's not to say that it's economically feasible, but you shouldn't take it off the table just because of an ideology,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. The nuclear one is exciting, actually. I mean, that's something where, innovation on that has stalled out, for a number of years, and there are these policies and these kind of hidden regulations, and also a stigma around nuclear that is unwarranted for the most part, and it that in itself is a reason to look into it more. When there aren't a lot of people that will argue that nuclear power is that the stigma around it is largely unwarranted, right? Yet it's still a politically unpopular issue. So I found it really interesting that it actually is it on your on the website, on the energy part of your platform. It's a major piece.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, we would look at that. That doesn't mean that we would implement it.
Yeah.
The fact is, we don't, like, no one really knows until you do a feasibility study. You don't know what it would cost to build one. But apparently, they build them all over the world now, right? And so there are countries that look at this, right? And Canada should be no different. If we want to be competitive on a global scale, the thing is, you need low cost energy, right? So, the lower cost energy actually you know, helps production. It helps the average citizen, right? Everybody, the one I've been named the critic for the for electricity and electric for BC Hydro and electric self sufficiency, right? And so that's my department now. The thing is, so I would take a look at anything that brings down affordability. And so what I was saying, that CBC was asking me that yesterday or on Sunday, and I was saying, okay, well, the thing is, what do I look at? Well, you're looking at administration costs. You're looking at delivering affordable electricity, and you're looking at reliability, right? And you also have to have realistic goals. And the thing is, when they say they're going to take every gas powered vehicle off the road and you're going to have nothing but electric cars, we have an electric car. And I'll tell you what, there ain't enough charging stations around, and they're too slow, right? And so, how they're going to build out that system within the time frame that the federal government wants them to, and the provincial government has endorsed, is unrealistic, right? It's not going to happen, right? So let's have realistic goals. The thing is, it's really great, and we should encourage electric vehicles, no problem. I don't think they work really great up north, right? They're really good for a commuter vehicle. Also, the fact is, when you have any kind of change, it takes time. So it doesn't happen overnight. So, look at realistic goals. Look, don't make up numbers just because it looks good on paper, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny, I did it, even until recently, I kind of was under the impression that at least some of the criticisms of the electric vehicles in northern climates were, especially in Alberta, kind of, this is oil country, where it was kind of just pro oil dogma. But I know a number of people who have them now, and more people are buying them, and that's cool and all. But yeah, a lot of them say the same thing. Like, a lot of times they put it away on, like, for the winter, because it's not going to work well for them, right?
No, no, we have an electric vehicle, and the fact is, so in the wintertime, okay, so you want to freeze, you turn the heat on, it takes the battery right down real quick, so you don't nearly get the range you would in the summer, right? So yeah, like I said, it's still a technology that's evolving,
Yeah.
right? And the thing is, you know what? And if you go back in history kind of repeats itself. So if you go way back when they had electric vehicles, they had gasoline vehicles, the gasoline engine won out, right? And over time they come out with different things. And I remember VHS and beta for tapes, right? All of a sudden everybody go, oh, beta's gonna be good. No, VHS won, right? You don't know who the winner is. So the thing is, there's probably going to be technologies out there in the future that we aren't even thinking of right now, right? So you have to have you want you want a government in there that thinks outside the box and doesn't rule anything off the table, because the fact is that you're supposed to be looking out for the best interests of the people that elect you. You're supposed to be looking out for the best interests of your province, and as a citizen of the province you should be looking out for the best interests of the country.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um,
So
the other thing about when it's regulations and mandates and things that they're kind of arbitrarily imposed, like you're talking about these unrealistic dates. Um, it shows a real disconnect between reality and, um, between reality and their ideology, because on one hand, it's even if you take at face value that an electric vehicle is better for the environment, you're going to need a lot more electricity to do that. And look at that Site C dam project in BC. I mean, look at the amount of pushback that, generationally, that happened to get that thing across the line. And the reality is, it sounds like the grid in BC is still vulnerable to, like, there's still, there's still, areas there where it needs to be improved, right?
oh, absolutely. The fact is that I seen a little cartoon there and it showed an electric car, and they were saying, okay, well, this car is all electric, so it's not doing any damage to the environment. Okay, but to power that electric vehicle, you're putting in charging stations. You have to have hydroelectric, right? And so, how much environmental impact every time you build a dam? Everything, there's always unintended consequences, and so everything we do has an environmental impact. And so you should be looking at the big picture rather than the small picture.
Mhm.
And far too long, governments do what's easy, right? And far too long, they cater to special interest, right?
Yeah.
And what they should be doing, they should be catering to the people who pay their wage and the people who elect them.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, now you're talking nonsense, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I want
Oh
to,
my God, that's almost a libertarian view.
yeah, that's right. They should be, yeah, yeah. Well, unfortunately, yeah, I crack jokes. I mean, I try to be optimistic, but we got to remember, government is, you're one of the good ones, Dave. But for the most part, government is the enemy on this show.
Oh no, we have a whole caucus full of good ones, right?
Yeah.
They're John made purposely wanted people that actually would represent their riding and actually have a voice. And he also said he would allow free votes, right? And that
Right.
was a selling point for me. That was the other selling point for me, actually, because living in this riding, as you know, it's pretty diverse, right? And the fact is, people here, they want to have a say. Right. So the thing is,
Mm.
just like me, far too long, I'd never even seen a candidate come around. Right. So, you know,
Yeah.
they kind
Yeah.
of you lose touch with them and they go like, well, are they really working for you? Who knows, right? Right. So the thing is, so for having a free vote, at least people here have a say, right?
That's right, absolutely. I think one of the problems that people run into, even, you might run into this yourself, is they get into politics for the right reasons, and then once they're elected, there's actually a lot of work to do. There's a lot of, like, day-to-day administrative type tasks that you have to fulfill, and it it it's just, it turns into a job that, and all this, where you can't see the bigger vision beyond, the end of your desk, the amount of paperwork that's in front of you.
And to your listening audience, I can reassure you, you're absolutely right. Since I've been elected, um, I've been inundated with, you got constituents calling you, you've got them emailing you, you're learning new systems, you're talking to different departments on with the government. Yeah, it's quite the learning curve. I'm kind of hoping it's going to slow down a little bit, but yeah, it is. The thing is, and the fact is that you also get treated different too, right? All of a sudden you go places and you go like, hey, there's so and so, right?
Yeah.
And so I can see how people get tainted over a while, right? And or burnt out, either or, right? And so you got to be level headed. You got to be organized, and remember why you ran, right? Remember, if you ran for the right reasons, you prioritize, and you have a goal, and you make sure you accomplish your goal.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Um, excuse me. Let's talk about that Liberal Party that was in opposition. They were historically, many of them were, card carrying uh, federal conservatives, uh, fairly tightly aligned. I think there was also maybe a bit of alliance between, a more liberal, uh, like more maybe the more conservative factions of the federal Liberal Party also. But for the most part, they kind of branded themselves as, liberal in name but conservative in policy. Was that and I'm thinking back to, some previous premiers that were part of that party. Um, was that just not accurate anymore, or was that maybe never the case?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. I would say that probably when going back to originally when before Gordon Campbell, I would say they were probably more of a liberal party, and they probably leaned more liberal. Once Gordon Campbell got in there, I think they went a lot more conservative from a free enterprise standpoint, because they sold off BC Rail and a lot of public entities, right? And they promoted a free enterprise, and they were also fiscally responsible, right? But I think over time, um, their social outlook on things, right, was more and more, I would say, more in line with the liberals, right, more on the left side of the fence, and that really doesn't really resonate with people as much as it did maybe 10, 20 years ago. People, I think COVID exposed a lot of things, and people don't like the fact that their rights are being eroded, and that we've gone too far left. And so the Liberal Party ended up changing the name because they wanted to distance themselves from the federal Liberal Party for that very reason. But on the same token, they still had a lot of policy that was kind of left, and they were kind of like in the middle. You know what? We Politics right now is pretty well. People know if they're left or right. They know they have strong feelings one way or the other. And I think with the United Party, they were kind of stuck in the middle,
Mm.
right? And they didn't know what they wanted to be, right? That's one part of it. They had a lot of baggage. They had, the scandals for, money laundering and people buying inflated house prices, right? Um, they had their share of scandals as well. And so it's just a culmination of everything. The thing is, they were a very ineffective opposition, right? So when all these mandates came in, they weren't they weren't heard. I can assure you that whenever they called the legislature back, as you probably know, they're not calling it back for this fall because they're very afraid. Why? We're vocal. We're not the United Party, and so the fact is, we are going to stand up, and we are going to be vocal. That's what they wanted. They want parties that are actually going to be there and stand up for what they want, and they don't want an ineffective opposition. They want an effective government, but they also want an effective opposition,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what they'll provide. And the thing is, they lost faith in the United Party,
Right.
and that was my take on it, anyways. Right?
Right. Um, so the United Party, like, did they win any seats?
They folded before the election.
Oh, did they? Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah,
So that's how
yeah. No,
closely I.
they folded before the election. Kevin Falcon, the leader, actually dissolved the party and decided that they would not run any candidates and withdrew all their candidates
Wow.
before the election.
So was there? Okay, okay. I gotcha. I actually didn't know that.
They were polling at 14%.
Oh,
They were polling at 14%. So he figured, you know what, I rather lose face and whatever the thing is. And they also, what he said, he did not want to see the NDP get in. And by splitting the vote on the right, it would assure the NDP of having majority government. And they wanted to make sure that there was a free enterprise party in government. And so the most effective way was them to pull up stakes.
mm, okay,
So
okay. Yeah,
it almost worked out.
yeah. So
One
and
one
well, and
seat,
that's the other thing.
one seat short.
You guys were there were a few ridings that were like kind of in dispute or something, or it took a long time to count the votes, and that might have made the difference in the balance of power. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. So the history of the election is that a lot of disaffected liberals decided that they would run as independents. And so basically, they did split a little bit of the vote off. And so some ridings lost by, say, like Vernon. NDP got back in Vernon because we lost by 400 votes, right? Because there was an independent who was originally running for the United Party, and he decided to run as an independent because he was disenchanted. And so basically, it split the right wing vote. And there was some ridings that was very, very close, and where they basically didn't have a split vote, but it was very, very close. And yeah, there was issues with elections BC. Um, they used tabulators this time around. Um, but there was one riding where they lost the ballot. They misplaced the ballot box and it was uncounted. And other ridings where it was so close that they ended up having to go to judicial recounts because it was a matter of 24 votes. There was a
Well,
few ridings where it was under 100 votes, so it was close, right? The fact is, like we couldn't come any closer to winning government than that.
yeah, yeah. Uh, and and how long is the NDP like? How long has the NDP been in power there?
They've been in power for 7 years. This will be the third election.
Yeah, hopefully the last one.
It
Um,
is the last one. I can assure you it's the last one.
yeah.
Right?
Well, it
We
seemed
can say
it.
that. I'll go on record. It'll be the last one.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. I'll hold you to it. Um. Well, and so let's talk about some of like because some of the crazy stuff that comes out of Victoria. I've had other people on talking about it. Um. One thing in particular is BC is such a beautiful place. Of course, I grew up in the Shuswap. Vancouver was one of my favorite cities to visit. Um, but we were down there in May for the capitalism and morality Vancouver seminar, and it was hard to watch. Like it was hard to you see people like you know upper middle class people basically stepping over dead people to get into a fancy restaurant. You know what I mean? And it was hard to watch. It was hard to watch. So, on and that's not something that is specific to Vancouver either. I mean, I think you would notice too, like even in the shoe swap in a town like Salmon Arm. I mean, the kind of vagrancy and presence of junkies is again, it's something that never existed when I was a kid, right?
No, no, it's getting worse. Okay, well, it goes back to again social policies, right? So um, there's way too much drugs and heavier drugs, right? And so again, the federal government doesn't have. There's no port police in Vancouver, in at the Vancouver ports, right? Why one of the few ports in the country that don't have port police. Border security is pretty limited, right? And so are they doing everything they can to stop the importation of precursors to make the drugs? Who knows, right? They're not doing a very good job. They could do a lot more when it comes to enforcement of drugs, right? Rather than giving away free drugs. So their answer to, well, we got a bunch of addicts, so let's give them some more drugs. And if you know anybody who's an addict or an alcoholic, you offer them a beer or you offer them drugs, they're going to say sure. Who's going to say, oh no, thanks, I'm trying to quit? Right?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? So you're only escalating the problem, right? And so and then that just leads to other problems because the fact is you got to get money for the drugs or you want to get drugs, you're going to go out there and you cause mayhem, right? There some aren't even in the right mind and smashing windows, vandalism, um, shoplifting, and then it's so prolific that the police turn around and say, "Well, we're not going to enforce it because there's just too many," and they'd be on call going to the retail stores 24/7, and so it's just chaos that they're allowed to run rampant. So the thing is, until they get a control on things, right? You have to, our proposal during the election was to, no longer safe supply, that you start actually opening up and getting more rehab and trying to get these people into rehab and stop the drugs coming into the country and actually have a justice system that wasn't a revolving door. So you actually start setting some examples and keeping people in jail. And we've tried it one way. It hasn't worked. At what point do you give up? Like, give up and look at it, and start going the other way,
Yeah.
right? It is ridiculous. People do not live in safe communities no more. And like you were saying, and everybody says they're big city problems, but the big city problems are slowly moving out to the country. Okay, so for years and years, it's been a very safe community around here. And the little mall out here, they have security now. And so over the last 3 months, and I said, okay, well, why is there security? Like, that's kind of a new thing, right? And it goes, yeah, well, it's because of vagrants and they're sleeping in the cove and they're at, excremating outside, right? And go like, okay, what? And they go, yeah, look at the port, right? I go, are you serious? Yeah. So it's slowly trickling to everywhere, right? But it's a get the drugs off the street, build some housing, make it so that people have hope and a future, and you may see some of the problems go away.
Yeah.
Right? You have to give people hope.
Yeah.
If you don't give people, there is none.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think, outside of as far as the rule of law on this subject, I think there is, a good libertarian argument for things like decriminalization, but at the same time, um, there are other there are other things that are impacted, like property rights, when by people who aren't in their right head. So you can have, say, a law that is like, yeah, we're not going to throw you in jail for doing this drug, or maybe not even for selling this drug. But the reality is you still have to be responsible for your behavior if you're taking something like that. And when you see people, like you say, using the front entrance of a storefront as a bathroom, I mean, that is an obvious violation of very basic property rights, and there should, like, those things need to be enforced.
Absolutely. So when you have all these liberal social programs, the thing is they look good on paper, but there's unintended consequences. And so they're not well thought out. Okay, now saying that, okay, so that's fine. Try something. When it doesn't work, what do most people do? They change it, right? And go,
Hmm.
well, that hasn't worked. Let's move on to something different. Whereas this government in this province, they double down. Well, it didn't work. Well, we just need more of it. Well,
Yeah.
then you get more of the unintended consequences, right? And that's where we're at now. So it'll be interesting to see where we go over the next 4 years, or less. I think it'll be less, but we'll see where things go, because they have to start taking into account unintended consequences, because for every action there's an opposite reaction. We've learned that in school.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's kind of one of the key, criticisms of government in general. So if you were um, a manufacturer of something, say you manufacture automobiles and you make an unsafe automobile, the market will destroy you really fast. Now, people aren't going to buy those vehicles. You're going to suffer financially in a bad way. But when your government, and this NDP government in BC in particular, and you create a structure like a social institution that is unsafe or that is causing damage, um, the reaction is basically to reward that institution by increasing its funding, right? And that is kind of totally backwards thinking.
Yes, totally backwards thing, but that's a socialist way, right? Government knows best, and they dictate to you, and they reward certain people, and they provide programs because somehow they think that they're making a difference and they're going to make a difference in people's lives, which they don't, right? And because somehow the market doesn't correct itself. Like I said, they have this attitude about, like, let's double down. Well, we just need more government,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly.
And that it's not going to work, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's touch on one more thing, or a few more. Maybe we got a few minutes left, but um, affordability. So, what, like, first of all, tell me what your Conservative Party's plan is for affordability, and then I might have some questions.
Well, start off with the basic thing about affordability is that let's start reducing some of the taxes, right? Um, so you want to taxes and regulations, right? Okay, people don't even consider regulations a lot of times, how that affects your affordability. But when you have regulations when it comes to building a house, the more regulations you have keeps driving up the cost. Even if there is no cost per se, time is a cost. We were at a fair, and there was a guy who was a developer, came by, and he says, Dave, you don't want to know what's wrong here? He said, I could buy a piece of property I want to develop and put in a housing subdivision, right? He said, by the time I go through all these regulations and stuff, he said, time goes by, right? And he was showing me the cost on his calculator. And he said, this is what I have to sell the lot for in 3 months. This is what I got to sell a lot for in 6 months. He says, right now it's taken years to get things through. He says, so a lot that you could normally sell for like 400,000, he says, I'm selling it for almost near $1 million. And he said, that's a time factor. So you have to cut, unnecessary regulations, and you have to cut incidental taxes, and so that would bring down costs when it comes to a lot of things. Generally, like housing, a car when you buy it. Like the NDP want to tax used cars, right? They're taxing used cars. Well, you've already paid a tax. Now you're paying. That's a tax on the tax, as far as I'm concerned.
Hmm.
That tax was paid when it was brand new. So again, it's coming out of your pocket, and that's so somebody's selling a vehicle. Um, you know, all these things add to your cost when you go to buy something, and so that's taking money in your pocket that you could be spending on something else, maybe food,
Yeah,
maybe the place to live, maybe to get to work, right? So though that's an affordability factor, right? The other thing is that if you have more competition, right, you start having economic development, and you actually encourage businesses, much like they did in Alberta with the Alberta Advantage, right? You encourage people to come and start a business, and you help them to succeed rather than trying to put them out of business. That creates, a place for people to work. It also creates competition. It creates innovation, and with innovation brings down prices. So that's an affordability factor. Um, you start having all these climate action rules. It's a great thing to care about the environment and the climate, and that's true. But on the same token, let's have realistic, you know, let's have realistic regulations, right? Like I said, let's rather than looking at things from a local or a provincial standpoint, let's look at it from a global standpoint. How much of an impact can we make? Where can we make the bigger impact globally, right? And without affecting our affordability here, right? Otherwise, we're all going to be living in caves, and you won't have to worry about the climate,
Yeah.
right? So the thing is, you know, so there's a lot of things that come to affordability. The other thing is that we have all these trade agreements. So you go to the store here and you buy apples, and they come from Washington. Why aren't we buying BC apples? Right? Why do we ship lumber from here from the mills down to the states and buy it back?
Hmm. Yeah.
These are all affordability issues, right? So there's a lot of things that we as a party would be looking at. You promote BC, you promote Canada. We don't like our leader John Rustad was saying, is that there is not even a free trade agreement between the provinces, and
Yeah.
yet we have a free trade agreement with the states.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's wrong with
Absolutely.
that picture?
Oh, for
What's
sure.
wrong with
So,
that picture?
so
Right?
absolutely. So that actually kind of brings me into like the my last question is, um, you know, I don't know if there's anything in your platform on this or what John the leader there talks about, but maybe even for yourself personally. I mean, there's a lot of things that are outside of your control because Ottawa is still a problem. And even when it comes to affordability, for example, like Ottawa controls the money supply, right? So that's a huge problem for affordability. So, like, ideally, how do you see the relationship working between the province of British Columbia and the federal government in Ottawa?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't think that the Western provinces have got a fair deal since Confederation,
Yeah,
right? And the fact is that I think that you have to have a strong government, but in all the Western provinces, right? BC and Alberta is lucky enough that their population base keeps growing, and so we get to have more of a say. But a lot of times, these decisions that are actually adversely affecting a lot of these provinces in the West. For instance, a lot of the grain actually gets shipped out, goes out through Ontario, the terminals in Thunder Bay, and that's been happening for like 100 years, right? The thing is, the short distance might be go to Prince Rupert or Vancouver, and the thing is, but massive amounts of product actually goes out the other way. Um, Oil, they won't build pipelines, right? There's this resistance to build pipelines. Again, that affects the Alberta economy. It actually affects the BC economy too, because BC is a big natural gas producer, right? We could be selling to the world, and these are federal regulations, right? And provincially, you have to have a coalition of the Western provinces, because then you have a big enough block that you have as much say as Ontario or Quebec. The other issue is the fact that Quebec, they control their immigration, and
yeah,
yet the other provinces can't. And the thing is, that's a big issue too, right? The fact is that you should have a lot. There should be a lot more autonomy to the provinces to have a say in a lot of different things. That right now you have big brother dictating from Ottawa, right? And the thing is, and there has to be some decentralization.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. When does the legislature resume in BC? Like you said, they're not going back anytime soon, but they have to go back at some
Yeah,
point.
yeah, they do. They're very reluctant to go back. I think they're afraid. They're afraid for a vocal bunch for an opposition, right?
Yeah,
And they have a lot of rookies, the same as us. We're all rookies in this side, except for maybe seven of us, right? But with them, they have, I think, quite a few rookies as well. And the thing is, and I just don't think they're quite prepared for the onslaught because they're going to be held to account. And so they held off. Usually they call legislature back right after an election and for a fall sitting. And they decided not to this time because basically they couldn't convince anybody else to be speaker other than somebody in their own party. Right. And so they're holding off. Again, if they're really working for the people, they promised the people $1,000 a family for rebate. And that was one of their election promises. And you think that they'd want to go back and pass legislation. And they decided, no, people can wait. That's how much they care about the people. And so now they're holding off. And so I just got an email today. I think tentatively we're going back early February.
Okay.
And so then they'll announce the speaker and the throne speech and the budget. And trust me, the budget won't be good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They've been holding off on a couple things. Right. They haven't given their last fiscal outlook for the latter part of the year, which is probably going to be not a good look for them. But they haven't released the results of their climate action either. Right, about how much we've reduced pollution. All these taxes that we've been putting out, I don't think it's not going to look good for them. Chances are they're going to say, geez, we're not getting the results we wanted. And we're actually increasing pollution with all these taxes, right?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, so we'll be going back in early February. That's the longest he can hold off. He has to have us back.
Okay. Well, you'll have to come back and talk to me after that, and I'd love to hear how it's going. I like everything you're saying. Dave, you're one of the good ones. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate being on anytime, and I look forward to being back on again in the future. Right? There'll be lots to talk about. Trust me.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Okay. Thank you.
That was Dave Williams, Conservative MLA for the Shuswap riding in British Columbia. You can check them out at conservativesbc.ca. Thanks for listening. See you later.